Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We're so excited that so many of you could join us today for Adrienne Maree Brown on Pleasure Activism. I'm Alexandra Elliott, the Senior Manager of Events and Engagement for the Public Programs Department of California Institute of Integral Studies, a nonprofit university in San Francisco. Now let me first introduce our presenters, Sonya Shah and Adrienne Maree Brown, and then we'll get right to their conversation. Sonya Shah is an associate professor at California Institute of Integral Studies in the School of Undergraduate Studies. In 2016, Sonya initiated the Ahisma Collective, an organization that works to respond to harm in ways that foster wholeness for everyone. Central to her core values are nurturing community belonging and collective care, healing, compassion, love, and transforming harm. Sonya is a Buddhist, a first-generation immigrant from the northwestern part of India, and feels most at home in nature. Adrienne Maree Brown is the writer-in-residence at the Emergent Strategy Ideation Institute and author of We Will Not Cancel Us and Other Dreams of Transformative Justice, Pleasure Activism, The Politics of Feeling Good, Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds, and the co-editor of Octavia's Brood, Science Fiction from Social Justice Movements, and How to Get Stupid White Men Out of Office. She is the co-host of the How to Survive the End of the World and Octavia's Parables podcasts. Adrienne is rooted in Detroit. And now it is my absolute pleasure to turn it over to Sonya and Adrienne.
Hey, Adrienne, how's it
Hi,
going?
Sonya. It's good to
Hi,
see you.
it's so good to see you. I remember meeting you a couple years ago at the Building
Yes.
Accountable Communities with Miriam.
Yeah. I was remembering that
Yeah,
too. I was like, oh, yes, that
yeah,
sweet face again.
yeah. And I guess before we get started, I feel like there's something about just kind of acknowledging that we're humans in the world who
Yeah.
might have had a busy day. And so just taking a deep breath. These beautiful people are here to just absorb whatever it is that we have to share, what you really have to share. And,
Mm.
just wanted to start with asking you to check in. How are you doing today? Anything that you want to
Hmm.
say before we get started?
Well, it's been a good day. I earlier today, someone was like, "How are you doing?" And I was like, "I feel like I really harnessed my energy." Some days the day gets going and your energy is sort of moving in many, many, many directions, and it's like trying to get things done all dispersed. And today I felt like, oh, here I go, I'm baking bread. Here I go, I'm doing my work. Here I go, I'm doing. I just felt very harnessed. And I have to admit, we're like in my bedtime territory right now, so I'm just sort of like, I just drank some black tea, threw on a red lip, and I'm just like, okay, you can do this. You can be awake.
Hit you with it. I can hit you with
Yes.
it.
Like I was like, I am here. So I was like, let me put on some sparkles and do we have this like tincture that my friend Dory Midnight made for pleasure activism.
Mm,
And I was like, oh, I always like when I take that right before a pleasure activism event, that also really helps. So
mhm, mhm,
all those things, it's new moon window. Um,
mhm. Yeah, so
I'm
many
feeling
things.
alive. Yeah.
Yeah,
How about
great.
you? How are you feeling?
I'm doing okay. I actually got my COVID vaccine shot yesterday, and
Oh
I
wow,
cried. I did. I
congratulations.
cried when it happened
Yeah,
because it was like this. Oh my God, I've been holding so much stuff in
absolutely.
um, about what's possible or not possible. I think the woman saw me crying. She's like, "Can I still give you the shot?" I was like, "No, I'm
You're
crying
like,
because
no,
you're giving it
I
to me.
want this.
Give it
Give
to
it
me.
to
Give it
me.
to me."
Oh, that's so
Exactly.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thanks. So let me ask you another question because there are these two amazing books, Pleasure Activism, obviously, that we're going to talk a lot about, but you also just wrote this incredible book, We Will Not Cancel Us, which I have a gang of questions about.
Yeah. I'm
Um,
like, can we talk about it? I was like,
yeah, so my question is because one thing I've learned from you is to like go with the flow of like
yeah.
what's alive. So
Yeah.
if we start with a few questions about We Will Not Cancel Us and then lead to pleasure activism, does that sound okay
Yes. I'm
with you?
I'm
Okay.
fine with it. I
Okay.
actually would like love to hear what you think about it. Like
I
we're in this work. So I'm just like, I want to
yeah,
know.
we're in this work. Well,
Hmm.
I'll tell you what I think about it. It made me feel a little repaired. It made me feel softer. It was like a really big gift. I feel like I thought it was one of the most bravest things I've read. I know that you
Mm,
wrote Unthinkable Thoughts in
mhm,
July, and then you followed up
mhm.
with this book. And I feel like it's this brave love letter to the movement,
Thank you.
particularly, movements for justice, to give voice to both a movement that strives to be about liberation and harm and
Yeah.
abolition, but also suffers from enacting some punitive stuff
Yeah.
that gets totally, codified into like cancel culture and calling
Yeah.
out culture and
Yeah.
shaming. And so I guess, and I think what's amazing is you also talk about just this idea that we're replicating the carceral system. The very system we're trying to abolish is the system that we're replicating with each other, and that we should
Mm,
be really choosing life. And
mm,
so, and choosing each other. And I was like, it just
mm.
feels so much gratitude for that work. So I guess for others that are here,
Uh-huh.
like, man, you wrote this book. Oh
Yeah.
man, how do you want to frame it for people? Why did you write it? What do you want to
Yeah.
say about it?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, first of all, thank you. I mean, thanks for reading it. Like I really had this place where I'm like, please, people, read this book and feel the love. It is a love letter. It felt like a love letter.
Yeah.
And when I first wrote the piece, and when it was like, that was also a love letter, but it was like, sometimes love shows up as rage, or love shows up as like uh, shouting out, just like, come on, y'all, like, come on. There's just such a, I recognize now looking back that I was coming back out of a sabbatical, and I got hit with this wave after wave of call this person out, do this, cancel this person. Like, and I was just like, it made me feel so full of grief, that I was just like, we are who we have. And we are all fucking up. I mean, we
Yeah.
are like, we are immersed in a system that is training and socializing and shaping us to hurt each other. And so we're hurting each other. But then here we are saying we believe that we can move beyond this system. And so I think the framing up of it is like, if you're an abolitionist, if you're saying defund the police, if you're talking about wanting to end the carceral system, if you're talking about wanting to end policing and prisons, and if you've ever had a loved one who either caused an egregious harm and you watched them grow and change, or caused an egregious harm and you saw them not get a chance, not get a second chance, not get the opportunity to return, whether that was because they went into the carceral system, or because they got canceled in their community or dismissed in their community or something else. It's for all of us to be in
Mm-hmm.
this conversation with each other, because the anger is righteous. The feelings that as survivors that we have, that are like, I want this person who has hurt me as far away from me as possible, and I don't want them to be able to
Right.
hurt anyone else. And all of that is legitimate, righteous. Those are the right feelings. It's like, that's how it feels.
Totally.
So I'm like, so then what do we do? And I think that, to me, the book is asking that question of like, I don't think that the just rampant cancellation and rampant call out everywhere is the answer. I want us to reserve that technology for the times when it is the only possible option.
Way.
And then I
Mm-hmm.
want us to skill ourselves up in a bunch of other options. And, we know this, right? When we first met each other, Beyond Survival was not out as a textbook, right? Now it
Mm-hmm.
is. Fumbling Towards Repair was not out as a workbook. Now it is. Patrice Cullors has a book coming out this year, The Abolitionist Handbook. Andrea Ritchie is working on a book on abolition and emergent strategy. Mia Mingus has a website full of resources. Like, there's so many options, like, it's like little shoots, little green shoots coming out of the earth. Like, actually there's abundance under here of resources and skills and stuff. The next book I have coming out is a facilitation and mediation book, and I'm like, mediation is a part of this. Community
That's
accountability
right.
processes is a part of this. Turning inward and asking ourselves, from where can I generate the compassion to continue being in relationship with people who have caused harm, especially people who have not caused it directly to me, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
when someone's caused harm directly to me, I want my boundary. I want to be able to
Yeah.
set it. But if they've caused it to someone else that's in the community, am I not responsible for that person?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
my mentor, I was grateful to have, lucky to have Grace Lee Boggs as one of my mentors. And she's been in my mind a lot lately. One of the things she talked about was like, we have to be able to take responsibility for each other and for our communities.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Miriam Kaba is talking about, you know, and she's saying like, we're not going to move from the carceral system to some other system where we outsource accountability and we outsource ending harm. Like whatever this transition looks like, it's one where at the end we have more responsibility for holding those who are still socialized to cause harm. We have more responsibility for each other. So it's all of that in a very tiny book. It's a lot of questions, you know, that I'm grateful every time someone's like, I read it, like, especially people who read the original essay. Cause I'm like, just read the book. It's like a lot happened in those windows, those months in that window.
Yeah. How was it received by the community, would you say? Because it's a pretty big thing to say, like, hey, folks, let's look at ourselves and be vulnerable at like, what are the things that we're doing right? And what are the things we could probably work on to change, which is not always well received. So I'm really curious about that.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the overwhelming response was positive initially. And then the second wave came that was like, you messed up and here's the ways you messed up. And it took a while for me to be able to hear that, you know. I was really, you know, I felt so passionately like I'm doing this thing that is an act of love. And so it was really hard for me to hear that I had fumbled in certain places. But because the other feedback was so positive, that was like, this is happening in our communities, it's happening in our institutions, it's happening here. I felt like there was something worth saving. There was something worth still. I was like, can I clear away what isn't right about this and get to the like root system of what is right inside of that. And the feedback to the actual book has been really incredible. Like there's definitely a few people who are still like, I'm not reading it, or I'm not engaging with it, or I'm not feeling it. And that's fine, right? Because for me, I really want people to I'm like, have these conversations in your community, make a choice, right? Make choices around how you want to hold this. I felt like we were operating without having had those conversations. Let's get into these distinctions. A lot of people have reached out to me who read the original piece and read the book and are like, good job. Like you did it. You listened. We can use this. Like we can, this gives us a jumping off point. So, you know, it's a slow burn though. I expect it to be like a slow process, right? Because it's one of those things where people, you know, there's a lot of people who are like, I don't, it's kind of like, I don't want to be seen with that book yet. You know, I got to see what other people think about it. And that's okay too.
Yeah. Well, here's what I think, like cutting edge work that's hard to say is actually not going to be received well all the time, right? Yeah. And it's going to be painful and you might be lonely as the writer. And I think we hold writers to the standard of like, you're supposed to know everything even before we've like thought about it all together. So you wrote a blog piece at a moment of time, and then you wrote a book that was filling out all the other ends of this blog piece. So I found it to be like, here's the heart of something that really needed to be said. And then here are the things that needed to get filled out. And so in that filling out, I think wanting to ask you about two things. One is you make this beautiful distinction between conflict, abuse, and harm, which I feel like is really important. You know, it's so at the essence of it not getting collapsed.
Yes.
So I wonder if you want to say something about that here.
Yeah. I mean, I really want to uplift Maurice Mitchell-Brody and Emmy Kane because and my sister Autumn Brown, because they all sat down with me with critical feedback about the original piece, which was that I was doing that same collapsing that I was saying like, y'all, we're collapsing all this stuff into one response. And they were like, yeah, and you are collapsing all of this into one conversation that it needs to be pulled apart and it needs to be held distinctly. And so, you know, then I started looking around for resources. I'm like, well, who has pulled it apart? Like, is there some place where it's really clear? And I didn't find something that was like, this is clear. Like people could pick this up and run with it. But I felt like I was learning, you know, because I'm someone who's like, I've experienced all these things and I still can collapse them. So one of the big things I wanted to pull apart was power dynamics inside of it. That abuse is when someone is actively doing a power over move, right? Actively using whatever privileged positionality, social location they have to manipulate, to gaslight, to hurt another person, to control another person. And the idea is, how can I keep that person in my control? How can I keep this institute in my control? Because we do have those kind of abuses of power. How can I keep this nation in my control? We've just come out of having 4 years of an abusive president. And that being able to make the distinction of like, when is it abuse, and that abuse really can't be mutual. Like, it's not like, oh, we just have a fucked up power dynamic, whatever. It's like someone is actually working the situation and there's some intention to it. And then conflict, right, is where people may be at a power differential. They may be on the same level. They may be multiple folks involved, but there's really like two positions that are being held, sometimes more, that are just not aligned with each other. And what I was seeing happen on the internet a lot was that both those things, like someone being abusive and two people being in conflict, or two or more people being in conflict, get collapsed into the language of harm. And so harm is much harder to actually parse out, like, well, when is it, who gets to determine what is harmful? And harm is really about impact. And I remember as a facilitator, there's this agreement that I often use, which is, it's basically, whenever someone says, oh, you hurt me, people are like, I didn't mean to, right? And so it's like, okay, I honor your good intentions, but I have to attend to the impact. And to me, harm is when we're talking about the impact, that it's like, I felt harmed. That harm may have happened because you did not operate with principled struggle. You didn't have integrity in the conflict. It may have come from abusive behavior, right? And it's really determined by the person who's experiencing it. And what I find right now is we have like this wave where people are calling everything harm. And then it becomes and I am guilty of this too, that I'll just be like, yeah, harm. And I understand it. We look for these shortcuts to be able to talk about impact. So those are some of the things that I kind of was able to pull apart. I also kept going. I was like, and there's also misunderstandings. There's holding contradictions, which a ton of movement organizations are operating inside contradictions that they then hold each other accountable to, as if they're not the contradictions of the world. So people who are in nonprofits being furious at other people in the same nonprofit for, colluding with capitalism. But I'm like, everyone who's working in the nonprofit industrial complex is colluding with capitalism because we're participating in philanthropy. Now, we need to drag philanthropy or destroy philanthropy, right? There's moves to make there. But that contradiction, to hold it against each other as if it's an individualization, as opposed to a understand that we're in a setting, those kind of things. I was like, how do we discern here? And then be able to really say the call out, the cancellation is for those people who are engaging in abuse. And it's in people who are engaging in abuse repeatedly, often. It's people who are engaging in abuse, and we have tried to hold them accountable in methods that would not make it a huge public show. Because I think a lot of times then it becomes this public show of having a certain politic instead of actually being able to address this person's journey for change. So yeah, it's all about like developing some common language to have more distinctions, to have more discernment around, if possible.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much in the work that you're also speaking towards, like abolition and talking about abolition, right? And so there is this piece where we say we're about something and then we have this contradiction, like nonprofits in philanthropy, like reenacting sort of carceral thinking, othering each other in ways that are just like really unpleasant. So, just talk to us about abolition. Like, I feel like it's just like, it's a word that's thrown out, but it's so deep, it's so powerful, it's got such a lineage. And like, what is abolition inside and out? What is it? How do we be abolitionists with each other? Which is a question you ask. How do we do that?
I want to know.
Not hold the punitive I think even sometimes the extreme of the call out, that we, it's debatable to me, like just what, like when we're talking about being, punitive, how do we really, how do we excavate the punitiveness from who we are, right? How do we, what is this whole abolition thing? What is that?
Well, in this journey, I think the first time when I was like, I'm an abolitionist, is I was reading about abolition in the period of enslavement, active, enslavement, chattel slavery, and the kind of people who said, I stand against this entire system. Nobody should ever own another person, and nobody should be able to punish another person the ways that these people are punishing and owning their labor and all of those things. And if you've paid any attention to the prison industrial complex at all, you know that slavery didn't end, it transformed. So we have this new way of doing it where we can own people, put them behind bars, use their labor, and punish them in whatever way we deem correct. And so to me, the work of abolition never ended. It also transformed. So now we see people who are like, I'm arguing against the prison state, I'm arguing against policing. And so for me, and I think it's been a great tension. Like I've had this conversation with a lot of people. They're like, well, we can't be like the carceral state. We don't have the power that the carceral state holds. We don't have the power that the police hold. And I'm like, we don't have that power. We also don't have no power. Like there's something about the power of having a community and saying there's belonging, and you get to be a part of that belonging, and we will hold you through whatever harm you cause. And, a huge part of transformative justice, which I think is like the modern flow of abolition, is saying like, we want to keep people out of the carceral state. And I think the distinction, or maybe the piece that I'm saying, is like, I also want to keep them out of punishment. Like I don't want to cause them additional harm. And I believe that when people are causing this kind of harm, it's because harm has happened to them. There's this beautiful quote Daniel Sured has offered us. That's like, nobody experiences harm the first time when they're enacting it on another person, that these things get socialized and planted into us. So for me, abolition is like, how do we end the cycle of harm that is running underneath the policing, the prisons, the punishment, the othering, the pushing people out, and wanting to say, when someone causes harm, you're no longer a part of us. We will put you elsewhere. And I also think it's like the punitive part, to excavate it for me, I've had to really examine how much I enjoy it, right? And why do I enjoy it? And I enjoy it because it means I'm not like that. Like I still belong. I haven't done something that bad, or if I did, I never got caught, or whatever it is, but I'm not bad like those people. And I'm like, what is that about? Is there something in me that's wired to want to destroy? How do I turn and look at the shadow of that? And I'm like, I don't want to say, and it only started during slavery, because I'm like, all of our peoples going back throughout history, all of our peoples have different places where we have caused each other great harm and enjoyed punishment. And, they're gladiators, and we've gotten joy out of watching other humans destroyed. So it's a very old tendency.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll resolve it overnight or very quickly, but I definitely don't think we're going to get to true abolition if we don't examine it, if we don't turn and face it. Because I'm like, I don't want us to say, okay, we got rid of the prison system, and now we just rampantly punish each other, much more.
Yeah.
And nobody ever gets to relax into belonging and knowing, like, on my worst day, I still belong to someone, to some people,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so deep, like, and not a question that many people have asked is like, why do we, like, what? And I think you ask it, why does it feel like we're committed to punishment and enjoying it? The enjoying it part, like, what is that all about? And I'm not sure there's an answer, but just really being able to sit with like when because we talk about when it feels bad that I did this thing, but like when it feels kind of good that I said that thing and I needled you and
because it creates a different kind of belonging. Like part of what I was seeing was like, the price of belonging now is, will I join the group to tear down this person who I don't know, like, I'm like, I don't know that person. I don't know the person who's asked me to tear them down. I don't know the scenario that happened, like even amongst my friends, and I think anyone who's very close to you will tell you that, like, if they come and say, this asshole did this or whatever, I'll be like, tell me more. Like, what happened? I want to understand the whole dynamic. And I try to hold some space for, I'm like, even if they were an asshole in this moment,
right,
this is still, the father of your children, or this is still someone who you at some point cared about or loved, and are they a lost cause, and is what we need a boundary, or is it the destruction of that person? And I think a lot about that. Octavia Butler is, I am like a scholar of her work, and she says our fatal human flaw, she wrote it into a story, so it's not like she walked around saying it, but our fatal human flaw is our commitment to the combination of hierarchy and intelligence, that we use our intelligence always to keep enacting hierarchy through war, through punishment, through all these different, through supremacies, right? We're constantly saying, I am better than, no, I am. And we're going to hierarchicalize ourselves right off the planet. Like we have actually something that we need to attend to, which is our relationship with the planet. And we're so busy warring with each other, battling each other, tearing each other down, that we're not attending to the real struggle of our lives, So
absolutely. Yeah.
All
right, one more question about this, and then we'll move to a whole nother subject.
And then we'll go have a great time.
And then we'll go have a great time and just be pleasurable.
And I find this pleasurable also.
Absolutely.
I'm like, I want to talk about these things. That's part of why I wrote that.
Well, absolutely. I'm assuming that like hard conversations, and like I was thinking about labor, I was thinking about the labor you put into this book, and the fear that you might have had to confront, or like people's feedback, and just like the relationship between like labor and joy, doing something hard and feeling pleasure, and just sort of, and maybe that's something you could even speak to, is like, what do you feel is the relationship between like hard work and fulfillment and pleasure? And joy?
Yeah. I think there's something like Tupac said, like, I don't want it if it's that easy. Like I've always been the kind of, I'm a Virgo. I'm like, I like to work hard. I like to really dig into something. And in this instance, it was like, I have this very strong sense that like, this is worth it. This is worth it. Like people that I respect are upset with me. And I didn't do this as well as I could have. Like I wasn't patient. I was like, I didn't look to see what the right wing was saying about this, or where J.K. Rowling was, or all these things. People have thrown everything that has to do with cancel culture in my way, and I didn't look at all that. But when I look ahead, like if I imagine being a part of an era of intervention, right, where we're like, no, y'all, abolition means we have to go this way. Like we're heading this way, but actually we got to pull ourselves over here, and we've got to go this way, like for something much greater than ourselves. If we're going to break with centering whiteness and centering supremacy and centering these ways, we have to go this way. Then when I think about what movement might feel like, it makes me very emotional. When I think of how hard it has been to be in movement, where I'm like, this is the place I most want to belong, is amongst the freedom fighters of our time. I want us to belong to each other, and to have each other's backs, and to speak well of each other when we're not in the room, and to just look and be like, wow, look how hard we're all working, so hard, like so far beyond any reasonable capacity. We are just trying to fix the whole world, and I want us to fight for each other. And when we see each other fall, I want to look and be like, oh my God, you fell down. Like, let me pause and let me help you get up. And like, I'm going to lean on me. Like, let's go, and we're so far from that right now. And that's okay. We've been under attack for so long. I think we're tired. And, you always take it out on the ones closest to you when you're that tired. But I feel like what I'm committed to is like, I want movement to feel like a joyful place where you enter and there's a lot of hard work, but you're like, I belong. I'm going to work hard. And when I fuck up, people are going to tell me, and we are going to work it through. And I know how to set boundaries, and other people can give me boundaries, and I know how to honor and respect those. And I will recover from my mistakes, for not just myself, but like on behalf of my people, my community, my species. Like I will learn how to be a better human. Like, I'm like, that's what I want movement to be about,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I feel like it's not a joy necessarily in the present moment, but, part of what I'm trying to learn from our indigenous comrades is like, we have to be willing to think a lot longer than just our own lives. I'm like, I can navigate if like there's people who are mad at me for the rest of my short life, if it means that in 3 generations or 4 generations, movement feels like a love place,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like
Yeah.
that'll have been worth it. The joy, I'll be a joyful ancestor. I'll be
Right.
okay.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. I'm going to just share something a little harder, a little more vulnerable for me.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, I think for spiritual, political reasons, I have still put myself in sort of a place of calling myself a restorative justice person, because I think in its more evolved iteration, it's really about uprooting harm,
Yes.
from a paradigm that's grounded in not being punitive and in relationship. And
Yeah.
I know it has flaws, and there's also a tradition in Oakland and in Chicago and New York that is very aligned in racial justice and gender justice.
Yep.
And when I hear, and this is a movement thing, right? When I hear people in the transformative justice community kind of like down it, I get my hairs go up. I feel angry. I feel disrespected, and I want to be a crab in the barrel, and I want to be like, row, 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 but you do this and da da da. And I hate that part of me. I hate the side of me that gets catty and gets angry, and because I feel disrespected, right? Because I feel like, well, you don't see my work, so why should I see your work?
That's great.
And I feel like, there's what your book did for me was feel like it's a part of a way to bridge something, right? So when we name like what might be wrong in our own movements, and like how we could just give each other a lot more grace of like, hey, things are young, we're still trying to figure things out, and being kind of like radically honest about each other and about not speaking crap, when we're out of the room. Like let's have some real talk, right? About that. Let's have some real talk about how we unearth and excavate those things so that we can actually be, I want to belong to you. In the mud. Me
too, Sonya. And like, I really love that you said this particular point, because I'm so guilty of that restorative thing, because now I'm starting to understand, like, I'm more of a philosopher. Like, I'm like, but just for me, it's just like the idea, I'm like, very clearly, I can just be like, oh, punitive is this, and restorative is this, but then transformative, and like, I get really into it. And I was in a conversation with someone last year who was just like a restorative justice activist, and like, don't dismiss what I'm up to. And I was like, I'm not, like, I'm just being like, that's great. But like, and she's like, but yours is better. And I was like, like, I was just, it's just like one of those beautiful moments where I was like, I was like, obviously we all want to be moving towards whatever goes to the root. And she was like, but we've been doing really good work here for a long time. And to me, it's so important to take those moments and be like, that doesn't feel good. Can we unpack why it doesn't feel good? Can I get more thorough? Can I get more inclusive? Can I not, be engaging like, oh, there's something better, or what this other new thing, now it's new and we've created it, it's better. So I actually really appreciate that, because I'm like, that's how we get in being being in it together.
Right.
And not just like battling with vocabulary, but really being able to be like, what is the idea that you're moving forward? Here's the idea I'm moving forward. Like, let's weave those.
And how do we really work with what we're about in our hearts and our actions, and not get stuck on the words, Oh, thank you for listening to that. I really appreciate it. Yeah. So let's move to pleasure activism, because like someone's going to kill me if we don't talk about this.
They're like,
we thought this talk was about pleasure activism.
We came here on a Friday night with our drinks and our,
and our little sex toys to talk about pleasure activism. Hello. So here's my question. Like, I want to start out with just like, I was just so excited to read this book that felt so much more than like an anthology. It felt like an All Boats Rise, like a collective lifting up of Black women and their wisdom and their care and their pleasure, and not denying the joy of Black women. And so I just wanted to ask you about like why it's so important to position the work in this way, why it's so important to talk about Black women's joy and pleasure, and why that has to be prioritized in this time.
That's great. Well, my orientation with my whole life is being like, okay, what's the best stuff I ever heard and the best stuff I ever learned? And then like, how can I amplify that and keep going with it, whatever that looks like. So Octavia Butler is that for me, has been that teacher. Miriam Kaba is one of those teachers, where I'm just like, okay, Miriam is right, and let's keep going. And there's a lot of those teachers, but Audre Lorde is a major one. And so when I read The Uses of the Erotic as Power, it shook me. It shook me like that. There's a particular paragraph in there where she talks about once we have experienced that erotic yes, it becomes impossible to settle for those states which are not native to us, such as self-negation, such as despair. And I spent a lot of my 20s, I think, when I look back, I was in despair a lot. And I didn't know the language for, I couldn't figure it out, but I didn't feel at home in my body. And I didn't have a larger analysis around that. I just thought there was something wrong with me. And I didn't understand that oppression and trauma displace us from ourselves and from our inherent right to pleasure and to satisfaction. And when I use pleasure here, it really is that contentment, joy, satisfaction, like being able to really feel the good in your life. And so Audre opened a door for me, that was like, there's a way that you can reclaim yourself that doesn't require anyone else giving you permission to be or liberating you from anything. It's like, you will have to do this. But once you do it, you won't go back. And I wanted that guarantee, right? And I want that guarantee for everyone who's ever experienced oppression to understand that when oppression happens, when the trauma of oppression lands on us and in us, it distorts us from our inherent purpose of being a human, which is, I believe, our purpose is to move towards life. We are life moving towards life. We are creating more ways of being alive. We are in these biodiverse systems that want to live and want to, be dazzlingly different from each other. It's actually a really miraculous thing that is true all through nature. Everything in nature is moving towards more life, and so are we. And but then inside of that distortion, we could think, no, I want to take my life, or no, I want to take someone else's life, or I will sacrifice my whole life, or maybe my whole life will just be drudgery, and then I'll retire and have a good year or two on the beach before I die, or I'll live a living death, and I will negate all of my desires and all of my longings, which, having seen enough Black women do that, I'm like, we are losing so much brilliance. We are losing so many ideas. We are losing there's so many creations and stories and things we need that are being lost to that impact of long-term trauma and oppression. So now I think it's actually a really important piece of what this era is about, is that we have secured so much freedom. That was the other thing, as I was saying, I was like, I'm one of the freest Black people to ever live. But I can't enjoy it. I'm not enjoying it. I'm like, I'm still finding ways to sabotage and bind myself to structures that don't love me and don't care about me. So pleasure activism really is like all the work we do to reclaim our purpose, ourselves, from oppression, and then to look at the things that give us pleasure and to make sure that we are not numbing, that we are not deadening our lives, but that we are doing the things that bring us to life, that help us figure out our purpose, that move us towards ourselves and towards right relationship with each other and towards right relationship with the planet. And it's really, it's incredible. It's incredible what happens in a room that is invited to move together towards life, in a movement that is invited. Black Lives Matter, I think the reason it has been so impactful fundamentally is because life is at the center of it. And especially this last year of uprising, it was like people are dancing in the streets. People are in movement with each other. We are singing. The art, the movement for Black Lives has become like one of the greatest artists that ever lived, and it's an exciting thing to feel like, oh, look at us reclaiming our aliveness after the oppression of being in this American experiment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So beautiful. Your words are like a cake. It's just like, they're so rich.
Here's cake.
So write it down.
Word cake. That's
Word
great.
cake.
I'm into the word cake. Yeah.
Lots of frosting. There's something about, the book is it's like a very somatic liberatory read, like
Yay.
reading it feels like a journey of the body. It feels like it's a journey
Yes.
of your body, and then like sharing the possibilities for others to have journeys with their own bodies.
Yes.
And I love how there's something you wrote about that your love of your body didn't start with diet and exercise. It started with pleasure.
Yes.
It started with pornography, self-pornography and self-sex. And I'm just wondering if you'd be willing to share a little bit about sort of the body journey for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I, like many people, I think in my generation, my first relationships with my body were corrective. My first intentional, I was like, oh, I must be fixing my body. Like, I have this body, and so clearly something is wrong with it. Like, it doesn't look like a body that would go on Cosmo. It must be fixed. And so dieting and exercising and constantly trying to fix and change my body happened early. I was told when I was very young that no one wants to marry a fat girl. And this was like the first time I gained like 10 pounds, And so it was punitive. It was like I was constantly like, something is wrong. It must be corrected. And I must deny myself things that give me pleasure. And I went to college, I did the things that seemed like pleasure, drinking so much and getting so high. And I discovered numbness, which was like next to pleasure. Right. And it was like, I was like, that seems like pleasure. But really, it started to kick in for me when I got my first vibrator and when I discovered ecstasy. Those were two things where it was like, oh God. I was like, hold up. Because I had started having orgasms when I was very young, but it was very like, this is this very secretive thing. And then I was like, wait, you can go in a whole store that is just dedicated to that feeling. That was so mind blowing for me. And I'm forever grateful to Babes in Toyland down on the Lower East Side. I was just like, I remember the first time walking into that space and walking out with a thing that was mine. And it was just about my pleasure. And I would go through these days where I was just like, I'm just masturbating. Basically, that's my whole purpose today. I just have like orgasm after orgasm. And probably I was going too far, doing too much, but I was just like, I felt so alive. I was like, I don't need anything else. I'm feeling myself. Like I could feel, the wiring inside my body. I was like, this is connected to this, is connected to that. Like, it just felt like such an internal discovery. And then ecstasy was like, it really saved my life. And I think, as with anything, I want to always be careful with these things because I'm like, if you have an addictive personality, you have to be careful with everything. I have to be careful with everything. And it was amazing to come across this medicine and I started my political kind of like activist career. My first activisty job was at the Harm Reduction Coalition, which was such a blessing and probably the reason I'm still alive, because I was trained like to reduce the harm that comes along with using drugs. Make sure you use them in moderation. If you can't use in moderation, don't use that substance. There's many others. Like there was so much about it that was like, I had a little ecstasy testing kit so I could actually test the pills that I received to make sure that they were MDMA and not speed or whatever. All this stuff was like really wonderful to have as a 21, 22-year-old just in New York, right? And I would get my pills on a Friday night or whatever, and I would go feel alive and chase that feeling and just be dancing. And I felt beautiful. I felt sexual. I would have people who, walking down the street would never turn their heads. And then all of a sudden, because my aliveness was so irresistible, they were turning, just being like, I want you. All of that was so empowering. And, looking back, I'm like, there was also depression, right? There was a lot happening all concurrently. I'm very blessed about the therapy that I started receiving in that time that helped me sort of place it all in context. Like, I had my therapist ask me, like, could you imagine feeling that without the drugs, without the vibrators, without any of those things? And then because I had this map in I was like, I know this is possible in my system. That led me on this journey of celibacy. It led me on a journey of putting all the substances down for some time. And I wanted to know if I could, and I could.
Yeah.
And that was like maybe one of the most liberating, the first sabbatical that I took. I really was like, oh, you don't need anything else for this. This is just in the body. So now it's like one of my missions in life. I really want everyone to know, like, no matter how much harm, how many times you've been hit, how much you've been abused, like no matter what has been taken from you, no matter how much you've been trained to believe that your body can never feel safe, reclamation is possible. Reclamation is possible, and it might not be total, but there is a path. There are many paths back into yourself, and I recommend somatic practitioners finding a group of somatic trainers, a somatically held support group, so that you have people who are just like, what does it feel like to return to the body? And I think anything is possible, as you find your home in your body, which is the only, this is my anti-capitalist pitch, but I'm like, the only thing you ever actually have in this whole life is your body. Everything else, you'll lose it. You'll give it away. You can be taken off, but not the body. So and now I have arthritis. So there's also this pain element. It's like, it's like, oh, that still works, even though, it's like I am in pain. There's moments when it's less, there's moments when it's more. But so now I'm in the next level of learning. Like, how do I find pleasure with chronic pain? And, new levels.
New levels. Yeah. I mean, there's something I was thinking about that, like age and how things change, at different ages.
It's not a game. It's not a game. It happens so much faster than you think it's going to.
Not that way.
No. And, it starts to get, because I remember I was like, oh, when I was young, you would just like hurt yourself and then you would recover. And now it's just like, sometimes I will hurt myself and I'll just be like, dang, I think that's a forever one. I think now that's just what's up with my ankle or whatever. Like, stuff will happen. I'm like, that, I don't know if this meniscus is going to heal or whatever. And, trying to face that and be like, how do I not surrender to hopelessness? How do I let that become a part of my identity now? And
that's right.
Heal what I can heal, but be with myself still if something's not going to heal.
So real. You said something so beautiful about, and you wrote this too, about this idea. I think it's really alive, kind of with like survivorship and ending rape culture, and this idea that we're not going to end it by squashing our desire. We're not going to end it by not being honest about shame and desire and pleasure. And I love this question that you had is, just about how we might even imagine desire that is liberated from patriarchy. Like, can we even imagine what desire looks like that isn't somehow in patriarchy? And I think that also connects to like all the stuff you talk about in terms of queer sex and just all of our internalized homophobia, all of our socialization, all of like the regressive thinking of beliefs. And so just wondering if you would talk a little bit about that, like just all these decolonizing, unearthing, just little simple questions. But they're so alive, and I feel like they come in these micro moments. Like, I might be like, oh, I'm so liberated, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I'm being such a like I'm being like, there's that internalized homophobia right there.
There it is.
And that's doing it.
Well, and it helps so much to notice it, right? To just be like, oh, I just called you daddy. How do I feel about that? Like, whatever it is. And it's just like, how do I claim what I want to claim? I'm always looking at myself, like, how do I not shame myself? How do I claim what I want to claim? How do I bring power into it? Because I can do anything. This is one of the things I think that BDSM community teaches you is you can really do anything you fucking want to, but you have to do it from your powerful. It's like, I consent to this. This is my choice. This is my agency. But I think the thing I'll say, decolonization, I love this term because it's like, take back the land, take the land back. And it makes me think of the territory of the body, right? That I'm like, the body, my mind, this is what I have. And colonization and capitalism and patriarchy and white supremacy and ableism have all tried to take me from myself,
Right.
take my body away from me, make me feel that I don't have agency in it. And so whenever I have those moments where I'm like, I'm reclaiming myself, I'm taking this part of me back. And queer sex is an incredible one, where it's like, oh, this sex is not lesser sex. Like, it's not like we're doing the best we can without that penis, I'm like, no. Like, if you
That's
are
like the
wired
title
for
of a
queer
book.
sex, I know. I'm like, well, but if you are wired, it depends how, and I do believe in that kind of idea of the wiring, right? I think some people are wired more for monogamy and others are wired more for polyamory. I think some are wired for, opposite sex, and some are wired for other things. Me, I'm just like, I'm wired for pleasure. So the gender, the genitals, like none of that has ever really quite mattered to me. But that internalized homophobia was still showing up where I was like, but we still have to figure out like where the penis will come from. Like, is this the penis, or do you have a penis, or is your penis in your mind? And there was just this moment of evolving where I was like, or not, there's no penis here, and we're going to still have a fantastic time, and I'm going to penetrate you, and it's going to be with my fingers, and my fingers are going to be the best thing that ever happened to you. Or like just really like landing in the confidence of like, all these bodies are made to bring pleasure to each other. How do we be with that? I think now starting to live outside of the male gaze and outside of the white gaze are two actions that I'm like, no matter who you are, for white people, for women, for men, everyone, I'm like, how do you unhook yourself from seeing everything through that very limited lens? And how do you begin to look at yourself through your own lens, right? So I started having these moments where I was like, oh, am I really looking in the mirror at myself through the lens of someone who's not here, some white man, where I'm like, oh, you look like a big Black woman. I'm like, but what if I look at myself through the eyes of a big Black woman? And I'm like, you're fucking gorgeous. Like, you look fantastic. You look like home. You look sexy. You look like a statue from the earliest time in history. You look like, right? You start to see yourself through something that predates the categories of whiteness, right? You're something that predates such a limited concept of gender, something that is primal, right? And I do think there's something in that, which is how do you begin to desire yourself, whatever yourself may be. And that has been such a liberating experience. I was just in conversation with my friend Sonya Renee Taylor. We're embarking on this journey called the Radical Permission Institute. And one of the things we talked about in planning it was how, for both of us, we had these massive awakening erotic experiences of being like, I desire myself. I'm calling out my own name when I come. Like, I want me. I want my pleasure. And I have learned how to see and touch myself and the kind of touch I like, and not just for orgasm, but just for the aliveness, to feel my skin, to feel myself and my skin. And that there's actually something quite sacred about it. And Alexis Pauline Gumbs is another teacher in this. It's like, if God is change, if we accept what Octavia teaches us, God is this force of change, then each of us is that force of change, which each of us is divine. And how do you make love to something divine, right? And how do you live a life as someone divine, interacting with a bunch of other divine beings? It's a very different way of moving through the world than, I'm someone who doesn't even deserve attention. I can't believe you're looking at me. I don't look like a magazine cover, whatever. I'm like, I don't care about that.
Yeah, this is, go ahead. No, go ahead. Please.
Well, I'm like, I want more people to notice the scripts in their minds, that I'm like, who, Malcolm X, who taught you to hate yourself, right? But I'm like, really? Someone benefits from you hating yourself. Someone benefits from you thinking there's something to fix. Who is that? And how much attention do you want to give them in your life? Right? Because by the time you notice that they're there, for me, it had already been like 20 years that I'd given them, rent-free occupation inside of my mind. Right? And
Yeah.
so I was just like, you're moving out. And it's not fully to the place where they're nowhere in me. You know, they still show up sometimes. Like my partner is designing clothes and I tried on something the other day and it didn't fit. And I was like, "Ugh." And I was like, hold up. I just need to show her how to make what's going to fit me.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
that's a whole different orientation than I'll never look good in boxer briefs. I'm like, yes, I
Right.
will. I will.
Yeah. I
It's just
will.
going to take a few more
The box of
iterations,
briefs are wrong.
The boxer briefs are wrong. It's not me that's wrong.
Not me.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so curious about like, like, I'm curious about like, so the piece of discernment, right? Like, so there's this
Yes.
place where it's like, is this coming from oppression or is this coming from
Yes.
the wiredness, right? So am I like, if
Yeah.
someone's sitting there, if I'm sitting here and going like, well, am I wired for monogamy? Or is it
Yes.
that I have scripts in my mind telling me that I'm
Yes.
actually, and like, how would you help people
Yeah.
discern? Or when someone says like, I think I'm more asexual, or I think
Yes.
I'm actually more, a nun, or I think that I'm,
Yes.
like, and then feeling bad that you can't access pleasure, but maybe I'm so oppressed that like, I don't know
Who
how to
knows,
access.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Who
like
knows?
teasing out that fine line, or just like the both and the 200%
Yeah.
reality of maybe some of it is oppression and maybe it's
Yes.
wiring, and
Yeah.
not beating
I mean,
ourselves up, not feeling guilty. Like, what do you
that's
say
it
about
right
all that?
there.
Yeah.
That's it right there. It's like,
Yeah.
for me, the first piece is always like some acceptance, right? Just
Mhm.
like, I've had friends who are like, I'm trying so hard to be poly and I'm so miserable. Like I'm trying so hard because I know that's a
Right.
better way to be a human, but
Right.
I'm jealous and angry. And I'm like, then maybe you're not that. Like it sounds like you've tried. And, my thing is not to say, oh, monogamy was oppression and now poly is the new oppression and everyone has to be that. I'm like, well, no. What we just want to say is there's always spectrums, there's always a range because we are biodiverse. Right? Like literally biodiverse. So for me, the wiring is a real thing. It's like some creatures in nature pair for life and others don't. And humans have the capacity to do multiple options. I tend to do sort of several, like longer things. Now I have someone where I'm like, dang, I really might be with you for like the whole rest of my whole life. Like, it's kind of amazing. I didn't expect to enjoy that. It's delightful. Right? So you have to be willing to be with yourself through changes too. And I think that's the piece is you won't know if you don't even ask. So when I talk to people who are like, I'm just monogamous, and I'm like, have you ever even considered anything else? Are you monogamous because you are terrified that that's the only way you can keep the attention of the person you're with? And just to start to interrogate those things a little bit to make sure you are that because it brings you joy, not because it assuages some fear. Because what I see so often is people being like, I'm monogamous, but they never relax into it. They're constantly looking for trust, like, how can I possibly trust anybody? I'm like, maybe the trust is hard because one or the other of you is actually not wired for this kind of engagement. And like, what would it look like to trust each other to be different in this? There's this beautiful model called relationship anarchy that I love, that I point people towards. Nothing is perfect, but it's pretty close. And it has this idea of like, what if you begin with trust in a relationship? What if you create your own agreements? Maybe you're monogamous 364 days of the year, and then one day something else happens and you don't hold it against each other because there's so many beautiful, sexy people in the world, like maybe, right? Maybe you go through phases of different ways of being. Like I find that I'm very poly when I'm single, like, like I love everyone and I love all my lovers and it's just like very delightful. But then when I fall head over heels into romantic love, it's like, I don't have the time, it's literally for me, it becomes I'm like, I am romantically involved in my work. Like I'm romantically right. Like I wake up like, my book that I'm writing right now is so sexy to me. And that's all I want to think about and give my attention to. And my partner, I'm like, that's a full-time life. So other people are different. They're like, I actually have the energy, the attention to do multiple things for life for years. So to me, most of it is like, be curious
Yeah.
about where the shaping comes from. Give yourself permission to try it out, and then give
Yeah.
yourself total acceptance to be however you actually are.
That's right.
I also love, and one last thing, and I know we're almost at the time
it's
zone,
okay.
but
We're at the
Ursula Le
Q&A
Guin.
soon. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Ursula Le Guin
Yeah, yeah.
is like this incredible sci-fi writer, and she talks about these things where it's like, what happens. Hers is a thing where you change genders, so you're like generally non-gendered, and then around the time of like a period, then you come into, you know, going more towards the feminine or more towards the masculine, and it's for the sake of what do you call it, mating, right? And then you come back out of it into no gender. So in the course of your lifetime, you could carry a child as a woman, and then the next time be the father of the child or whatever else. And it's The Left Hand of Darkness is the name of this book. So I think about that too, that I'm like, maybe all of the labels could fall away, and you could just be like, what am I in relationship to this person?
Yeah.
With this person, I am monogamous or more submissive or more dominant or more feminine or whatever. And then with this person, something else emerges.
For sure.
Right. And I kind of love the idea of like these, it's like, what if all the other stuff fell away and we weren't like, you know, I don't walk into a room like, here's my labels, you know, because I'm like, who knows?
I don't know.
In this
Let's see
room,
what happens.
you know, something new might be possible. So
absolutely, it makes so much sense. Love the way you talk about it all. So yeah, we're just going to transition into questions because I have a whole gang of questions for you. So this question from Lala is, what embodiment practices or rituals have been helpful for you to ground into pleasure in the period of COVID aloneness and self-isolation?
Oof. Yeah.
In the period of now.
Yeah. So I will speak to this from the period when I was in Hawaii, because I was in Italy when the pandemic like really took off, and I was like, I have to leave Italy. And I came back to the US, but I was supposed to be on sabbatical, so I didn't go straight home. So I was in Hawaii, which was like, this is a great idea. But then of course I get there and I'm totally alone, like no friends, no family, no touch at all for 3 months. There was no human contact, no one to say hi to me, you know, other than like the store checkout person. When I initially got there and like stocked up as if I was going into hibernation. So it was just me and the ocean. The ocean was who I spoke to, and then like people by phone. And I didn't realize until like maybe a month in, I was like, this is now the longest I've ever gone in my entire life without human contact. You know, since I was born, I've always had friends or family or partner or some, you know, lovers or somebody to touch me, to hold me. And I felt that starvation feeling, you know, I felt that like, I'm going to eat my own hand, or, you know, like, like I can't masturbate enough to get that. I need something more than that feeling. So some of the rituals I came up with, one was to get in water every day. And whether it was a bath or the shower or the ocean, well, that was available. But the bath became like my go-to, just like immersing myself in the water to let myself be completely held and to understand that like I am water. It became very much like, this pandemic is too much to hold. I'm going to let some of this go with the water, which helped me learn that when I'm held by people, like really held right, you know, it allows me to let go of something that I don't necessarily realize I'm holding until I'm in their arms. And the bath for me was the thing that was able to do that, to wrap all the way around me. And then my friend, Rebecca Winder, is a massage therapist. And so she put up these videos that was like about self-massage. And I hadn't really studied self-massage. I didn't know how to do it, but it really, I mean, she just taught so much about like what you can do. Like anyone who's watching right now, you can do this. You just take your hands and place them right at the crook of your neck to shoulder. Just put a little pressure and push upward. And it's like, oh, I can immediately feel the pressure and there's some release there. It's not quite the same as, you know, being in the arms of like a great Swedish masseuse or whatever, but there's something there. And then I got intimate with friends in a new way, intimate with my partner in a new way, which was I started taking baths with people and like letting myself be naked with people who I was like, we would have maybe gone to like the mineral pools, or we might have gone to a bathhouse, or we might have gone and been naked around each other.
Right.
Okay, the Zoom lords will see these titties, you know, like I'm just gonna do this. And so my friend circles, like we would gather and we'd just be like, okay, everyone get in your bathtub and show whatever you feel comfortable showing with. It's not about the show.
It's not
about the show. It's just about like, let's be
Not
at
voyeur.
ease with each other. Like I need to be able to just be myself. And that helped a lot. And then mushroom tripping, you know,
You're like,
mushroom trips I found very helpful for this, because for me, when I'm tripping, I will notice that everything is deeply interconnected, and I will feel the universe. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm not being touched, right? I'm not being touched in the ways that I'm used to. But if I can tune into this, I'm still completely connected to everything that's alive, and I'm not alone. That's what mushrooms do for me most times when I'm tripping. And now my tip with mushrooms is make sure you're in a fairly steady mental state, because you will do some shadow work with most trips as well. So it's not the thing to do if you're like, I've been struggling, you know, for the last 5 days and I can't really get out of the darkness. I'm like, don't do the trip right now. Do the massage.
Work your way up there. Yeah, exactly.
Work your way up there. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a slightly different question, kind of related to belonging and sort of finding your niche. So the person asks, I deeply struggle understanding my place in this work. When I learn about authors and teachers, I immediately feel inadequate. I think maybe I need to go back to university, even while I resent the institution of university. Do you have any suggestions on how to find your niche?
Ooh.
Oh, yeah, I want to know.
Yeah. I'm like, well, I mean, one big thing is most of us don't have a niche, right? Anymore. That was a thing in the past, but now it's like you have as many as you want to have in a lifetime. Like, but the thing I hear under that question is imposter syndrome, that piece where it's like, I don't really belong here, or I'm not as good as some other people. And I want to point to Alicia Garza's latest book, The Purpose of Power. She has this really beautiful section in there where she reminds us that imposter syndrome, for most of us, especially as women, imposter syndrome comes from patriarchy. And that's this constantly undermining our sense of self, and understand that oppression is constantly undermining our sense of self and pitting us against each other. And so that feeling of like, oh, if someone else is good, I must not be, or I'm not as good. As opposed to like, you know, my tendency is more like, oh, that person's really good at that. I'm going to let them be good at that. I'm just like, I'm not that person. What am I going to be good at? What is my area of, I wouldn't say expertise, but like, what is my, Octavia called it positive obsession. And I think that is really at the crux of like what makes us great at anything, is that we have things that we can get positively obsessed with. And a positive obsession is something that nourishes you. Like by giving your attention, giving your time to it, you find yourself fulfilled. You're mentally fulfilled, emotionally fulfilled. And I think my first positive obsessions, you know, were pleasure. And it took me a while to come back around to it and be like, are there enough other people interested in this conversation that this could be? I mean, I'm shocked that I'm like, that was the book that blew up, was the pleasure book, you know? Like, I'm like, I've done so much serious organizing things, but like what you want to talk about is pleasure. Okay. But I'm like, but it is a positive obsession where I'm like, it never gets old to me to watch people step into themselves. So for me, it's like that nourishes me. But there's people who feel that way about everything. And so I would stop worrying so much about like, how do I find a niche in relationship to what other people are succeeding in, and really turn inward and be like, what in life arouses my interest? Like where can I like go down a YouTube hole and just like, you know, or Instagram hole or whatever, and just be like, I can't stop watching this. And whatever it may be, it might be reality TV. It might be anything, whatever it is, really let yourself go all the way, get all the way in there. Just be like, what is of interest here? I think if you actually give yourself over to being interested, very quickly you will become interesting to someone, to some people, to your peers. You'll find your people that way.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, like my experience of, when I talk to so many people, my own experience has been like really finding your bliss and just going with your bliss.
Exactly.
Like just go with it. It doesn't pay. It doesn't do anything.
Exactly.
You don't know anybody, but you just do it anyway.
You just do that thing.
You just do it.
It's
and you
the
find
thing,
your
like,
circle. You find your circle.
And you find your people through that. Like Octavia, I will say it might mean you go without as much sleep.
Yeah.
There's periods of time, like the things that have brought me to that peak bliss, that ecstatic experience meant writing till very late at night or early in the morning. Like almost all of my books I have written on the edges of a full-time job.
Yeah, right.
But I was like, I can't stop thinking about these birds and these ants and these bees. Like I'm obsessed. And so I'm like, find the thing that like, it's really hard to put it down at night. And as soon as you wake up, you want to get to that thing.
Yeah.
And even if you have to do it around your work or, I definitely had jobs where I was like, I'm secretly doing this and I'm getting the data entry done quickly or whatever,
Yeah. I'm going to move to the next question, but I think there's another thing just in that just before moving is just that there's a piece about like this longing for belonging that is a constant struggle, and the loneliness of not belonging or feeling there's a price for belonging. And
can we talk about that?
Can we talk about belonging for a minute?
This to me is what I understand is like the major burden of being displaced from the land. Like if I was to say one thing that was like, this is what the impact of being displaced from land is actually about, is when I imagine and kind of remember back that I'm like, at some point I had a people. I have multiple lineages, and all of them were people that knew land and had instructions for caring for that land and had rhythms in relationship to the earth and nature. And in that imagining, there was no question of belonging. You were of and you had a role. And then to be, in a million ways, we've all been displaced from those lands and those instructions. And so in the stories of my people, some of them left on purpose, and some of them were stolen, and they found each other and then continue to be displaced here. And so now that becomes part of my life, is figuring out like, how do I root into the earth itself? How do I make a direct tether for myself back to the earth and start listening again for some instruction that reminds me that I am of earth. I am an earthling. I am earth seed, as Octavia says. Like I belong here. And the not belonging is the lie. I belong here, and when I die, I will return to the all. Which I think is the ecstasy of death. The how I want to face death is very much like, this moment is about remembering that I belong and I will return to it all.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. All right, here's the question from Marcella. Can you recommend any strategies or practices to try to turn the experience of failure into pleasure? In American culture, I love that. Failure tends to shut us down rather than open us up, trying again or moving on. That's such a great question.
That's a great question, Marcella. Let's see. In ideation processes, it's a celebratory thing to have a failure because you are accumulating data about what works and doesn't work. And so it's like, oh, all right, that's not it. Let's get to a new thing. So you get to try something new. I think actually celebrating it, I think about failures in the bedroom and how quickly I laugh about those now, where I'm like, oh, I have arthritis, so I can't do everything I used to be able to do. And I just have these moments where I'll get to an edge and be like, just kidding. That's not happening right now. We're going to change to something else. And being with someone, being in relationships where you can laugh at those moments and be like, oh, now we know what that containment is. And containment itself can become a pleasure if you're in it with someone else. I think in a work environment, I think part of it is really being able to have like a learning, like a curiosity for learning. To me, the pleasure comes from like, oh, look at that. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, and now I know that. And I find the pleasure is in the learning. And so there's this, Rihanna has this tattoo on her clavicle, never a failure, always a lesson. And I live it that way now, where I'm just sort of like, I don't fail, not in that way anymore. Because if something doesn't work, like the we will not cancel, you know, the unthinkable thoughts, I'm like, like I didn't fail at that. I learned something that was actually quite profound, many quite profound things that I think have made me a better writer and thinker. You just, it's like, if you can get into the lesson, you're good.
Yeah, I think there's something about the way failure is seen. It tends to be so like black and white, you know, in the sense of that, like, and I think about it really a lot in terms of facilitation, right? Like this, I learn so much when I don't do it right. And I'm like, oh, you didn't like that. Oh, good. Now I know I have to think about that more, and like that process of like self-awareness and really getting into that praxis, thinking of like, oh, and what worked, what didn't work, so that I can really chew on it, you know?
I love that. And I also love how if you know something's a failure, it means the person trusts you enough to say it to you. Like, even if they're angry with you, there's something about being in a relationship where people are like, I can tell you that that did not work. That is not how I want to be talked to. You know, I'm living with my partner for the first time, and you know, it's such a beautiful thing to be like, oh, that didn't work. That's not going to work for us, baby. Like, I love you. So like, we're going to have to figure something else out. But sometimes the failure, what feels like a failure, is really just like everyone being honest and saying we haven't quite found our way. Like, each of us has our own way, but we need to find our way, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a question from Anna. How are you doing? We have about 10 more minutes. You're good?
I'm doing good. I'll try to be more
brief. So no.
I'm doing it. I'm awake. So that
you're awake. You're flowing. You can be as long or short as you want.
You're good company. Good. So
oh, good. Yay. Yeah, it's all good. So this question's from Anna. I don't think it's coincidental that your revelation that you could access ecstasy came during sabbatical. Recommendations came with pun intended. Recommendations for finding those places of rest for those of us who are unable to take significant time out of our daily grind.
Yes.
Capitalism is brutal. True to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I really think a few things about this. One is I'm just like, it's really important that we transform what workplace looks like, and that care and sustainable hours and like humane hours become a part of like our workplace norms. So I work with the Emergent Strategy Ideation Institute, and like, we are so loving with each other about the fact that like, we just can't do that much right now. You know, like, we're like, let's just do the things that we can do and let go of a lot of things that we can't do. But one of the things that I feel is so important right now is to stagger, to find ways to stagger, to be able to say, I need an hour even here, and to find like, what is the amount of time that is possible now. Some of the things that I've been doing is setting different boundaries around what time is even available to people. And I used to just be like, anything is available. Like, I work 5 days a week, and then weekends are always a conference, or always a gathering, or always an event. And then I won't take any time after that. I'll just go right back into work. And now my weekends are mine. My weekends are mine, you know, and I really love imagining the labor movement fighting for me to have them. And so when I take them, I'm like, this was fought for. This is me using something that I'm supposed to have. I also think in relationships where there's children involved, that having that pod or that co-parenting or that, you know, community, not just to all be raising the kids, but to take turns, you know, it's like each of us gets an hour in the bathroom. We might take a bath, you might take a shower, we might just sit on the fucking toilet looking at Instagram, but each of us gets solitude time. I really find that I don't think we are meant, and I don't know that we can actually take the kind of time we need if we're totally alone, trying to manage everything. I think that community is the answer to this question.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, so good. I mean, I think it's back to that piece about self-care and collective care, and this like radicalness of what do we really need to do to be in
Yes.
like deep care for ourselves and
Exactly.
each other.
Exactly. And like, you know, for part of the pandemic, I was living with my parents. And so I would like work hard, and then it would be the end of the day. My mom is like, I want to now talk to you. And my dad was like, I want to talk to you. And I was like, oh shit. Like I was just by myself for 3 months with no human contact. And now I have all these people who want to, and I had to be like, oh, it's not harmful. It's not hurtful to people to just be like, I'm going to be with you, but I need to go take a bath, or I need to go for a walk by myself.
Yeah.
Even if it's just 15 minutes, I just need something that's my own. You know, we all need those moments of our aloneness that restore us to come back and be with.
Absolutely. Yeah. Beautiful. Couple more questions. So this is from Suzanne. I'm wondering if you might talk about the holding and being with grief and grieving, and also allowing for joy and enjoyment.
Yep. Yeah. Well, first I will say my ancestor altar is popping. Like, there's so many ancestors there. It's like the center of my home. So if you're going to the bathroom or anywhere else, you kind of like are moving through the ancestor altar realm. And I think it really helps to be in an active relationship with my ancestors. So I have water and I make fruit offerings, and, you know, like I'm very much like, I love y'all. Your life brings me joy. Like the fact that you existed and I have our memories still brings me joy. And I focus on that. I also really believe the Khalil Gibran quote that your carves out yours. This is where I could feel the tired. The sorrow carves out the space for your joy, and your joy carves out the space for your sorrow, that they're actually not separate things, but related things. And I'd be remiss not to bring up my friend Malkia Cyril, who created this whole community called Pandemic Joy, where this is what we do every week, and is we hold space for grief and joy. And the assumption is that everyone is grieving, instead of the assumption being like, oh, no one's grieving, we're all fine. And then someone like brings it in. Our working assumption is like, of course we are all grieving. Like so many people have died. And if we have any empathy, even if it's not someone close to us, the loss is all of our loss. And for most of us, we do have people who are close to us that we've lost. And then there's the grief of being alive and awake. So there's always something to hold. But I don't know, for me, I don't even know how to grieve without joy showing up. Grief, you know, I had someone teach me that grief is gratitude. Grief is part of how I love. It's part of how we all love. When you fall in love, you are signing up for future grief. Like you're either going to lose that person to death, or you're going to lose them to heartbreak or circumstance. So, you know, there's some reason why it's created that way. It's meant to be connected. It's what it feels like to be alive, is to grieve. And I'm really a New Orleanian in when it comes to this. And I'm like, I really love the second line model for being with the end of a life, or the end of a moment, the end of a thing. It's just like something was alive. Let's celebrate that.
Yeah.
Let's bring out all the good stories. What did they offer us? So.
All right, that was the last question. Then maybe we'll like check out. Yeah, we'll check out. We'll just be like, how are you doing right now? This is from Katie. What is the most pleasurable thing about your relationship with your creative process? What feels best about what comes through you?
Oh, thank you, Katie. I love everything about my creative process. I love being a creator. Like I love that that's one of the things I was called to do in this life. I love that I know I'm in alignment when I'm singing every day. And the way that I am as a creator is things flow through. I'm a channel creator. So I'm not like sitting like, how do I get this idea out? Like my main work is to remove the obstructions in myself between me and spirit, or me and ancestors, or me and, you know, bees, or whatever, you know, whoever was trying to use me. And I have to say, I have this new song that I've been walking around, this universe, won't you use me? Take my heart and my mind and my body. And it just like goes on like that. But it's just this, it's like, it, to me, it's like, I'm just saying, universe, like create through me. Like we are meant to be, I am mold, I am clay, I am dirt, I am tree, I am like the same thing, the same stardust, I'm meant to be used for creation. So for me, the creative process is really just surrendering to that. And it's very joyful. And I can't believe that I get to spend the majority of my life doing that. It feels like I pulled something off, like, I don't know how I did this, but
Beautiful. My God, thank you so much for all of you. I think some of this is like, I know you're talking about all the things that you absolutely love, yes, but it's also like, it's a lot of you, it's a lot of beautiful work for it. So so much gratitude for all your sharing.
Thank you.
I was swimming in so many of your words, just like always want to take those phrases and just write them down.
Oh, we did a good job. We did a good job here. We created a nice sacred space. Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah. So let's just check out, like, how you're feeling, anything you want to say before sort of, I might say some words and then I'll transition it.
Yeah. I feel really good. I feel really satisfied. I feel really plant-like, right? Like I feel like your attention felt very like water and sunlight and good dirt, so I feel very like, like how plants come up and they like turn towards the sun. And now I'm like, okay, good. That was the day. Now I'm gonna rest. So I think I will sleep well tonight. That feels good. So thank you very much. Thank you. And thank all the people who are present that we can sense but not see. So
exactly. Yeah. No, and thank you. I feel I like the metaphor of print light, because you were like sunshine, and it just felt like there was some nurturing happening in some many different ways, about pleasure, about the movement, about just a lot of nurturing, a lot of care. I feel very intimate. I feel close to you right now.
Yeah, me too. Like we're friends now, okay?
We're friends, okay, good.
All right.
Friends. Cool. I like it. So thank you for just kind of coming in with intimacy and like trust and having conversations in that way. So yeah, so maybe like we could take a minute. I'm just going to say some nice closing ritual words. Just want to really thank everybody who's listening, who just sort of showed up and took their Friday nights to just be in this conversation and to be with Adrienne and myself, and to remember all the amazing ancestors that are at our backs, that allow us to be free in this moment, that provided for us the weekend, the labor workers, all the folks that allowed us to have pleasure, and all the folks that we're fighting for, all the kids, all the people to come, all the beings, all the earth that we're fighting for, everything. Just to take a breath with each other, to remember to love each other, to lift each other up, and all boats rise, and that we can do this and we can be in the mud together. Thank you so much, Adrienne.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Alex, who are just going to say some out passing words.
And like, take us out, Alex.
Take us out, Alex.
Thank you all so much for attending this evening. We hope you will join us for more of our upcoming talks and workshops. This conversation was recorded, so if you would like to watch it again or share it with your community, it will be available on our YouTube channel at this same link and on our Facebook page. We will also feature this talk on our podcast, which you can find at www.ciispod.com or by searching CIIS Public Programs on your favorite podcast app. Thanks again for joining us, and have a wonderful evening.